Neutral zone, where grit meets growth. There's no clear path, we carve our own. Every shift, every unknown. Pull up a seat, it's time to start. Turn down the noise, hear the heart. Neutral zone, this is where grit meets growth. Oh, 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 this is where grit meets growth. Neutral zone.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Welcome back to episode 5 of the Neutral Zone. And joining me today, I'm excited to have a member of the Kansas City Mavericks who has kind of made his way up through the collegiate ranks and also has a very big role and an interest in leadership. And I think will be an interesting interview today. And I'll give him some time to share about that as well later. So please welcome to the episode, Nolan Sullivan.
Awesome. Thanks, Sarah. I'm excited to be here with you today.
Absolutely. So Nolan, for our guests, I kind of like to start everything out like you would see in a starting lineup for a hockey game. So what I would like you to do is just take a brief moment and tell our listeners a little bit about who Nolan Sullivan is on the ice and who he is off the ice.
Yeah, absolutely. So on the ice, so I grew up in Minnesota. Hockey's kind of in the blood up there. Got thrown into it at a young age with 2 older brothers and a dad that played in college at Providence. So I'd say by the age of 3, I was probably on the ice, but more likely than not getting thrown in the net for target practice for my brother. So a little bit of a mix there, but loved the game. Loved playing multiple sports growing up. Played baseball and football as well. So I was always the athlete that when the hockey season ended, I honestly didn't want to play it in the summer. I wanted to move on into other sports. And, I think that actually helped with my overall athletic ability and helped out throughout my career. And then off the ice, I would just say, my faith is probably the biggest thing in my life. Being a follower of Jesus is super important to me. I spent a lot of time as far as leadership goes within the church, getting to use my platform, my story to try to impact and influence really the younger generation of believers and people. So that's what I like to spend a lot of my free time doing. But yeah, really anything leadership related, whether it's Steadfast, my company that I know we'll talk about more here in a bit. Those are some of the things I like doing away from the rink.
I love that. And you're one of the first guests I've had that kind of talked about your interests in other sports as well. So a lot of times it's either like hockey all year round, but it sounds like you kind of like to take a break and explore some other sports as well. So
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like sports in general is really becoming that one sport at an early age, and I'd be the first one to tell you I'm not a fan of that. I do think there's a time and a place. Like I made that decision my senior year of high school, but if there's a younger athlete listening to this, like have fun playing other sports too. Don't take it so serious at an early age, but just really understand that all sports really have a lot of similarities, and especially from a leadership standpoint, if you're an aspiring young leader, I think getting that experience in different environments is big as well.
absolutely. And that is something that I'd like to touch base with you later on that we've talked about in a few other episodes is kind of like where sports has come lately and kind of, some changes that you're seeing across the board with that. Um, So for this first period, we're going to kind of focus on like your hockey journey in general. So you did mention growing up in Minnesota, and that is kind of the state of hockey, I guess you would say. So growing up in kind of that competitive environment, do you think that is maybe where you kind of learned, I would say like a competitive edge that you needed to have going forward in life? Do you think that's kind of where that was built? Just because you kind of had to have that growing up where you did with hockey, or was that something that you kind of learned over time?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say for me, I was never the prettiest, most talented athlete out there. So I think no matter what sport it was in, I would say I definitely have some God gifted abilities. Like never, I feel like I always made the top teams, but a lot of that came through consistency and hard work. So I would say I've always been very disciplined because I knew that if I was consistent, if I was disciplined, if I showed up with great energy, focus, a great attitude, and was just really a solid teammate to those around me. That was going to help give me the best chance at having success in hockey as well. And so I think that definitely directly correlates to life, whether it's in class or it's with, in business. I think the more you can show up and truly be for other people and helping others out, it really helps add value to your stock, which isn't why you do it, but I think it's a nice benefit on the side. So, yeah, I would say that's a great focus, especially for young leaders. It's like, hey, how can I actually just go out and serve and make other people better too, which is in turn going to challenge you.
Absolutely. And do you find coaches, whether it be in junior ranks or even in the minor leagues with like the ECHL, um, what kinds of attributes are those coaches and those scouts looking for that are kind of setting people apart, just besides like the top stats and things? Like what would you say are number one priorities when they look at athletes?
Yeah, it's another great question because I think one of the things I'm passionate about doing on the side with steadfast, which again I know we're getting into that
Yeah.
later in a sense, but I think a lot of athletes overlook like who they're becoming. If I'm a parent, it's like, hey, what's the next skill session I can sign up for? What's the next strength thing? It's all focused on the physical, but not always is focused on, hey, like what kind of person am I becoming? And I think as you move up the ranks, one thing you realize, whether it was, for me from high school to juniors or from juniors to college, college to pro, the players get better and better, right? So big
Mhm.
surprise as you go up, you start realizing, hey, I'm not the best player here. And so it's like, okay, what are some of those other things you can contribute? Like I talk about like the intangibles a lot with athletes I work with. What are those things I can show up and deliver to the team that my coach can depend on? And I had a great conversation actually today with my coach in Kansas City. And he's like, "You're always going to have a place here wherever I'm coaching." And that has way more to do with the person I am in the room and in the locker room and just being a great teammate than really anything else that has to do with my game.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and that's something I think too that crosses over just into the real world in general, because even with, teaching with students, we always tell them, you're more than just a test score. And, I don't know where we've gotten away with that because you can't really even attain it to like, well, businesses are looking for the highest test scores. Businesses are looking for great people that they can
Mhm.
grow into, you know, top top employees, but they're looking for great people first of all. So I think we need to continue as a society to kind of get away from that. It's all about your numbers and what you can contribute outwardly, and focus more on what can you bring inwardly um, to the table.
Yeah, and the only thing I would add to that too, and I think this applies in real world, it's like the stats and the numbers don't tell the whole story. Like there's been times throughout the course of the season, or just take hockey specifically in this scenario, where the points are clicking from like a goals and assists, and not like it looks well from the outside. And then internally, I'm like, man, I'm not playing to the best of my abilities. And then vice versa, there's times where I'm like, okay, maybe it's just not clicking from a scoreboard standpoint, but I know I'm doing all the right things to be successful. And so that's where, I know for myself, like when I'm evaluating my progress, I don't always go back and just look at, hey, how many goals did I have? How many assists? What's my plus minus? Because I just don't think that tells the whole story. And so I think it's important to have other metrics and measurement that have nothing to do with the stat line to kind of push yourself up against to keep growing.
Yes, I 100% agree on that. I think it's up to kind of our coaches and our teammates and ourselves to kind of, remind each other and remind ourselves of that. We're more than what the stats say. And, as a person of faith myself, just like you mentioned earlier, I think it's a lot easier, for us to be able to go back in the scripture and be like, this is who the Lord says I am at the end of the day. So it doesn't, this other stuff doesn't matter as long as I can go back and see, who he says I am. So it's a lot easier when I think you can come at it from that perspective as well. Um, so you mentioned kind of growing up with the junior ranks as well. What junior? I guess I should say, what junior league did you play in? And can you kind of talk about maybe are there big differences between the different junior leagues, or is it just kind of location based, or what kind of separates them? As different leagues, I guess I should say.
Yep. So I was fortunate. One part about playing in Minnesota that's a nice benefit is the hockey's so competitive that you can play in state without having to leave. So I got to play with some of my best friends growing up through my senior year of high school at Eden Prairie, which was a huge blessing looking back and a real reason why I think I love the game still today. Some of those memories I made with those guys. And then what's interesting with hockey is in college, you don't really redshirt. So in other sports, if you're not ready to play college, instead of just like coming in as a freshman and sitting out that year, they actually send you to these junior hockey teams. And so for me, I played 2 months after my senior year in Aberdeen, South Dakota for a team in the NAHL. And then I played 2 full years in Muskegon, Michigan, which is the USHL. And so the USHL is the only tier one junior hockey league in the United States. So that'd be like the best possible league to go to. That NAHL was tier two, so one league below. It is changing, which is interesting now with the landscape of hockey and some of the NIL stuff. There's some Canadian leagues that factor into this as well, which was not the case when I was playing. So when I was in the USHL, most of the kids that went from or started in college hockey all had some sort of track record in the USHL.
Okay. Yeah, I noticed a stat. I think it was maybe the ECHL themselves put out a stat line of like the changes with the Canadian hockey leagues and the junior level, kind of with the impact that that's had on like Division One hockey and things over the last year. And I want to say it was like a 35 or 40% uptick in like the amount of Canadian junior players that were joining the Division One ranks in college. So I thought that was an interesting stat and something to keep track of.
Yeah, it kind of goes to show there's an even more reason for conversations like this that there's a whole new pool of players in hockey that have the ability to play Division One in the United States, and so even that much more, I think I would emphasize the importance of like, okay, what else do I bring to the table besides just my physical skill of playing hockey? You know, like what is going to separate you and really bring your value up to a college team?
Right, and I think it's you have to kinda start looking at it as you would like a college application, you know? Like if you I was helping one of my students fill out an application for med school last year and, you know, the pool is so big and it's like, okay, you have to figure out those things that set you apart besides just your grades in certain classes because everybody's gonna have those. So it's like, what are the extra clubs you were involved in? You know, what are your qualities as a person? How passionate are you about pursuing this? Things like that, and I think that kind of like you alluded to, I think we need to kind of approach that as well in the athletic side of things of when you are trying to push yourself out there to get noticed by teams, they're not just going to look at the stat line. They're going to talk to coaches. They're going to, you know, look at your life and see, you know, what are some character traits and things that motivate you or that you can bring to the table that are going to set you apart. So,
Mhm. Absolutely.
now you did mention going into college, and you played, I believe, in Nebraska. Is that correct?
Yes, Nebraska, Omaha. Yep.
Okay. And so I was kind of looking into just for researching the podcast. I noticed that you got an A in in your sophomore year and then moved on up through. So I feel like that's kind of rare at that younger level of getting noticed for leadership. And so I just wondered, like, what was it do you feel like your teammates and your coaches saw in you, while you were there that kind of got you into that leadership, aspect as early as you did?
Yeah, I think I spoke to it a little bit earlier on the podcast, but just this idea of I knew I wasn't the most highly rated recruit coming in when I was at Omaha. I had a massive class of freshmen. There was 12 of us total, which is about half the team. At that time, we'd actually transitioned coaching staffs, and I was our first recruit under the new coaching staff. And so, in a lot of ways, I was like, okay, we're building something new here. We're building towards the future, and I really just I think got excited about being a part of that, being a part of that vision, being a part of building something special, right? Like and does that have to do with winning? Absolutely. But it also has to do with like, hey, what was our relationship like with the fan base? What was our relationship like with students and making sure we had the backing of, our school and the people in the town. And so I would just say I had a lot of intentionality going into my freshman year. I think for a lot of people, you're just kind of dipping your toes into it. You're trying to just get comfortable in a lot of ways. And I'm definitely a person that takes a while, whether it's a couple months, to get comfortable in new situations. But I think once I got my feet underneath myself, it was like, okay, like let's go make impact. Like understanding, hockey was such a big deal for the community of Omaha, and you could really just help and impact so many people along the way. And so, yeah, I think just looking for people in front of me that I could use my
Mhm.
platform to help, but then also for my teammates. I didn't have to be in a leadership role. Like I was coming off Muskegon where I was the captain. I'm like, okay, I'm kind of back to the bottom of the totem pole where I have to earn my stripes. So I think just doing the little things, not complaining, and yeah, just looking for ways to help out and to make sure things were getting taken care of.
Yeah. Well, and then let's continue on with, your jump to the ECHL and to Kansas City. So kind of looking back when you were first signed, you mentioned Coach O'Hat earlier, and he had mentioned that he was kind of praising your 200-foot game, like you're giving it all across the entire ice. What do you think was like the biggest adjustment for you moving from maybe like a more structured version of junior or college hockey into, the minor leagues? And kind of how did you adjust to that?
Yeah, I think for me, the biggest thing, especially when I first got to Kansas City, like the team was stacked. And so in my head, coming out of college, I thought I had done enough to play at the AHL level, which would technically be one league up. And so when that wasn't the case, I'm like, okay, well, how do I, go to the best team in the ECHL and kind of prove my worth? And so I think when I got there, it was a little bit of a rude awakening because I'm like, thinking, all right, I'm going to be the best player and all this stuff. And just like that, you're thrown into the fire once again. Hey, there's a lot of good hockey players here, and that team was incredibly special and had some high talented forwards. So once again, I think for me, I'm like, okay, what do I actually like supply to this team that's different? Like, why did they bring me here? And I think just getting comfortable with showing up with that authentic version of yourself, like not trying to be something you're not, not thinking just because I'm not playing as much as I'd like or I'm in and out of the lineup, I have to change who I am or how I'm showing up to get more, or to try to earn more, I should say. But just really sticking to my guns of like, okay, this is why I know they brought me here. They trust me. They just want me to grow and develop. And if I just keep putting in that work in, eventually this is going to click over time. And, I think I got to see that over the course, especially this past season. But really, those 2 months, as hard as they were when I joined the team after my fifth year and wasn't playing and was kind of in and out, like I think I grew the most as a person, and really showed up as a stronger version of myself that next season.
I love that. And, authenticity is such a big thing. And I want to touch on that in a few minutes anyway, with the importance of kind of that being I feel like that's the first step. When I talk to my leadership kids and just any of my students in general, I think step one is nothing's going to sink in unless they know who they are in the first place and what they bring to the table. And so, um, I'd love to talk with you about that in a few minutes as well. So, moving into the second period here, this is kind of where we're going to talk about life beyond the rink, and just kind of a quick background of like how I came to try to ask Nolan to come on the show. Um, I follow Kansas City quite a bit, along with the other teams, because I do sit behind the benches, and uh, I believe it was one of your I think it was an episode that you had talked a little bit about something that Kansas City had done, maybe like a community service or something you guys had done, and they had tagged your account on their socials. And so I had went to the clip and noticed that you were doing a lot of leadership things. And so I was able to kind of share a couple of those episodes with my kids, and they really were diving deep in that. And so when I started this podcast, I was like, I need to reach out to Nolan and see if he'd be willing to come on. And thankfully, you agreed to do so. So, um, so what I would like to kind of give you a few minutes, first of all, is just kind of talk about steadfast hockey. You mentioned it a couple times. Talk about what that is and kind of your passion for that and why you started it, and what your goal is moving forward for that program.
Yeah, absolutely. And just before I hop into that, just to honor you quick, Sarah, like I think sometimes we underestimate the power of our words and how we can encourage people. And so the way I kind of got introduced with Sarah was through a note I got at one of the games, just kind of telling me her story, her background, and the reason really why she got into podcasting and stuff. And so I think whenever you try something new, and this will kind of lead into, I guess, the heart behind steadfast, but it can be scary. It can be challenging. There's a lot of unknowns. There's a lot of messiness in the start of like, okay, I don't feel like I'm very good at this. So I think there was a lot of insecurity even in putting myself out there on social media, especially as a current player. And even like the podcasting stuff, all of it was very new to me and something I don't feel like is a huge strength. So Sarah had given me a note that ended up being very encouraging along with, some of my other listeners. And so I just, I want to say that one to honor you, Sarah, but then also for your listeners as well. Like, don't underestimate the impact and power of your words. And just like something you might think is maybe like nonchalant can be that extra push and motivation somebody needs, to keep pressing in and to keep going after a dream or goal they know God's kind of placed on their heart. So I appreciate that. So as far as steadfast goes, and so that's really what this started. So when I graduated college 2.5 years ago, I immediately started Steadfast with the hope of just impacting, influencing, and helping really mentor and build up the next generation of athletes. A big part, I try to give the 60-second synopsis or the, I guess, spark notes on my story of the why, but just had some really hard things happen. So we talked about in college, being in a leadership position from sophomore year. That is a massive honor. It's one of the things I'm most proud of, but it's also brought a lot of added pressure, most that I probably put on myself more than anybody else did to me. But it's because I cared. I wanted to see the program end up in a better spot when I left than when it started. And so I think I carried a lot of that weight. I carried a lot of, hey, this all rides or falls on me, which wasn't healthy, nor was it true. I think I tried to take a lot of the control back from God. And it was working. Like, I think that's the hard thing sometimes. I think we can work so hard and make things happen, like as leaders, as go getters. But that doesn't mean we're doing it in a healthy way, in a way that honors God. And it kind of came to a halt for me my senior year. At this point, it was my first year being the actual captain of the team, not just an assistant. And the back half of my senior year, one of my assistant coaches, Paul Gerard, had been battling cancer for about, I think, a couple of years. And it took a turn for the worse. And he ended up losing that battle to cancer and passed away. And then the last game of the season, I ended up getting a high ankle sprain and missed the playoffs against North Dakota, who ended up upsetting us. And then I was dating a girl at the time. That relationship broke off. And I just got into this summer and just felt like a shell of myself. And I was like, a couple of things I noticed was I didn't want to be around the people I loved. I'm a big people person. And I just completely like secluded myself. Didn't really feel like I had like the energy to meet up with people. And then the other thing too, I was just getting like weirdly agitated. Like, I'm a super easygoing person usually and like to have fun. And I remember I was playing mini golf and I like missed the shot and I was so pissed off. I'm like, I took a step back. I'm like, why am I mad right now? Like, I'm legitimately playing mini golf with some of my teammates. And so I think it was important to see some of those indicators to start recognizing like, all right, I'm not in a healthy spot. Um, and so thankfully for me, UNO hired a sports site going into my 5th year, and I got to like start working with her right off the hop. And after about a month of working together, she had diagnosed me with like a low grade anxiety and depression, and wanted to medicate me. And I was like, I kind of broke for the first time. I actually remember going home to my roommate, Griffin Lutke at the time, and just breaking down in his arms. It was the first time I felt like I was actually able to like surrender this weight and this pressure that I was trying to carry as a leader that just wasn't mine to hold. And so that was really the first time where I started inviting people into the process. I wasn't no longer like Nolan, the leader, trying to do this all on my own, but I really took kind of that proverb to heart as far as like, hey, you need advisors, you need people in your corner that are pushing you to be at your best, that know you 100%. And that's like one challenge I guess I would ask your listeners right now is like, who knows you like 100% of you? not like 90%, not even 98%, and then you give the other 2% to somebody else. But there's so much freedom in having a friendship where you can just be 100% open and authentic and show up with all your messiness, all your chaos, and your successes and your wins too. And they just celebrate and love you where you're at. And so that was really, I think, the heart behind starting this healing process of, all right, I'm successful, I'm doing well in college. Like from the outside looking in, everyone would have said like Nolan's in a great spot, he's crushing it, he's doing well. And internally, I was blowing up and I was not in a healthy spot. Um, so really, it's been a long few years since then. But I would the only other thing I'll add is I started seeing a biblical counselor the next summer as well, and that was absolutely life changing. And so that led to getting into Kansas City and really being like, okay, I wish I would have had some of these tools and tactics when I was a younger athlete. I think it would have just helped me navigate some of those hard seasons in a healthier manner. And so that's really the heart behind what I do today. It's very performance based as far as like, hey, I want you to become that best version of yourself. But at the end of the day, I just want them to know they have somebody they can talk to and they have someone in their corner that can support them and just meet them where they're at.
Love that, and I do feel like it's something that's very needed in today's time. I feel like, the mental health side of sports and just life in general, I feel like is kind of, stigmatized. Even especially I feel like in the faith realm of things, because I think we're just taught, just take it to the Lord and he'll take care of it. And it's like, okay, but he has gifted people to be able to, provide means of therapy and different things. That is a gifting from the Lord too. And so I think, when we do need help, it's okay to reach out and ask for it. And it's not something to be looked down upon. So
Yeah, I would just say there's like I think a lot of strength in it, and there's a lot of healing, and even I think the enemy wins in isolation. So I think
mhm,
anytime we can voice something in our head, like these insecurities, these doubts, these fears, it's like it actually steals the power back and brings, I think, the freedom that Christ calls us into in a relationship with Him. One of my favorite people is Jamie Winship. He runs a company called Identity Exchange, but he worked as a police officer for a number of years. And he's like, okay, envision somebody coming up to an officer. They just, did some type of crime. And the officer is like, what did you do? And they just said, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. It's like, okay, well, that's great, but that doesn't actually help like solve the issue. Like they have to say what they did. Like, hey, I just robbed that house, or I just, and so it's like, okay, once you tell the truth, then we can go from there. And I think it's the same thing in a relationship with God. I remember like when I first became a believer, I would sin, I would mess up, I'd have these things in my life that I would just say like, God, I'm sorry, which it's like, okay, that's great. That's a good starting point. But God's not afraid of our mess. He's not afraid of, there's nothing too big I can bring to him that would change the way he loves me and cares for me as his son. So for me, the best thing I can do is like identify and recognize like what's the truth in this. And so in that season of life, it was just like, God, this is just too much for me to handle. The truth is, like, I don't trust that I'm a good enough leader to navigate this, or I don't trust that you're going to be faithful and good in this season of my life. And I think wrestling with that and bringing that to him, I think there's a lot of freedom and healing on the other side of those wrestles.
absolutely. Well, and I just finished a book by JP Pokluda
Hmm.
that's called Your Story Has a Villain. And it's kind of exactly what you just mentioned. I would highly recommend it um, to anybody that maybe is struggling to see like we are in a spiritual battle. And it talked about how, COVID is probably the best tool that the devil has had in a very long time. And I do see that as a teacher too. We just had kids isolated at a very important transformative time in their lives. And they were isolated for a year. And so we are going to be feeling the effects of that for years to come, trying to get them back into, good social communication and talking through things and how to make friendships and the importance of it. And, coupled with social media, I think sometimes people think, their friend count on social media is the amount of friends they have. And it's like, that's not what friends are, you know? So I I'm with you in agreement on that. So
Yeah, and if there's any encouragement within that for a listener too, like I think healing and freedom that I'm talking about here is closer than you think. Like you're not
mhm,
stuck in your mess. You're not stuck in that feeling, whether it is like some type of, depression or anxiety or whatever it is, that feeling that you're going through. Man, just know God is so good. He loves you so much. He's so incredibly faithful. And it's not to say it's not hard work and it's not gonna, be a challenge to grow through it. But I just like would encourage anyone walking in that, one, don't do it alone. And two, just know healing's closer than you think.
absolutely. Well, and he is going to provide a door for you. You just have to take the first step through it. It's
Hmm.
just they're gonna be there for you in your life. You have to walk through it, and you're not gonna walk through it alone. So,
Hmm.
um, so kind of another thing I wanted to talk about. You talked about authenticity, and I kind of want to pair that with like identity. And I think going back to talking about sports nowadays and being one sport and things like that, I feel like a lot of times young athletes and even athletes that are older, um, their identity is tied to something that is fluid and can be up and down. And when your identity is tied to that, then your emotional capacity is going to be this, and your life is going to be a roller coaster. And you have to have something that's constant and steady that you can anchor yourself to. And that's where I feel like that authentic self and, what you bring to the table needs to be that anchor. And so, just in the sports world, how do you kind of keep your own self worth and your authenticity separated from like your performance? What have been some tools that you've kind of found to help you with that? And how do you do that yourself?
Yeah, I mean, just to be super honest, I think that's one of the hardest things for all athletes, including myself, that it's like been an ongoing learning lesson. And I think there's been a lot of growth in that for me personally, but I also think it's one of those areas that's really easy to fall back into, whether it be some of the negative things that happen. You're just like, oh, I'm not good enough, or I don't measure up, or I shouldn't be here. Or really even the flip side of that too, when things are going super well, to be like, oh, look at me. Like it's all about me kind of thing. Um, Identity's been one I've loved this concept. Once again, Jamie Winship's a great resource on this if anyone is interested in this topic too. But um, I think there's two sides to this coin, and I think this is where it plays into sports for me, or where I've seen the most victory in it. Um, is one, understanding like, okay, so there's a general identity you have if you're a person of faith, like you are a beloved child of God, you are a masterpiece, you're an heir to a kingdom. So and there's, plenty of more that I'm not naming off the top of my head, but there's all these different things. And I have seven different ones. I should have pulled it up on my phone, but I have seven, I think, of these truths of like just who God calls us as Christians and as children, that are like, hey, this is my identity in my faith in God. And that's for everyone. And then I think on top of that, and this would be the other side of the coin, is you look at a passage like Judges 6, and it's a story of Gideon, and Gideon's like supposed to be this like massive warrior. He's supposed to be this leader. He's supposed to, really carry himself and lead all these people. And you see him in this passage being a coward. And he's like refusing to step into his full identity, and he's doubting himself, and he's in a place of fear, and he doesn't know what the outcome's going to be. And what's cool is you see this interaction. I think it's with an angel in this situation, maybe not God, but it's like the angel's like, "Hey, mighty man of valor, like more or less, what are you doing?" Like not in a condemning way, not in a, "Hey, like I'm so ashamed of you" way. It's like a, "Hey, mighty man of valor, like I've created you for more. And I've created you to walk out in this identity of victory and this identity of strength, but you have been listening to the voice of the enemy. You have allowed the voice to speak into your life to force you to kind of cowered up in this situation and to not trust who God is." Um, and so I think for me, once again, it kind of comes back to actually what I just said about telling the truth versus just saying I'm sorry. I think the old version of Nolan would have just kind of cowered, like you see Gideon do. I think the new version that I'm stepping into and continuing to become identifies those insecurities and then brings them to God. So, like, for a pro athlete, it's really interesting because I think from the outside looking in, it's a 72 game season. You're not always going to be at your best. And so I think at those times, like there's self doubt, there's streaks where things are going super well and clicking. There's other streaks where, you just can't buy a point or a goal. And I think, especially in those times, just bringing that to God and being like, you know what, Lord, I don't even feel like I should be on the team today, or I don't feel like I'm as gifted as these guys. Whatever that insecurity or fear is, that thought that's going through your head, it's kind of like what the Bible would say of like, take every thought captive. And I think that's why there's some crazy stat of like, on average, we have 80,000 thoughts a day or something close to that. I want to say 80% of them tend to be negative about yourself or other people, and 95% tend to be repeats from like the days previous. And so I'm like, okay, to me, that really gives us this 5% window to speak life over ourselves and to speak and be kind of our biggest cheerleader in a sense. And it's not like this fake it to make it. It's just like, hey, what does scripture say? Like, what is the truth? And the truth is that God loves you. There's nothing that can separate you from his love. He's created you for impact and influence, and to be partners in the mission of like sharing his love and faith with other people. And so I think there's this concept, and I'm kind of rambling at this point, I think, on this one, but one thing I've thought about too, there's this idea of cosmic irrelevance, which is kind of a funny topic, but I think when I'm thinking too highly of myself, it's good to take a step back and be like, okay, in the big picture, what does this all mean? Like, what is it worth? And I think it kind of humbles me back to just being like, all right, let's just take the next step and focus on what God has in front of me today.
Right. Right. Well, and I think it's, it's those times I think we learn most when we're in the valley and not just on the mountain. So I think too, just kind of recognize like when you are going through something, being, flipping it on its side, the other side of the coin, and being like, what does the Lord have for me in this moment? And like, what can I learn from this? Because whatever I learn from it, I'm going to be better off for it. And so I think too, flipping that to that mindset is a big thing as well. Um, and I just kind of wanted to touch base on the for this last part or of section 2 here is you know, college with your degree. I found you were talking about something one time with the degrees that you have from college. And so I wanted you to touch base on that a little bit because I feel like it's not typical of degrees that you would see from athletes coming into, you know, sports. And so I just kind of wanted you to touch base on what those degrees are in and kind of what led you to pursue that.
Yeah. So going into college, I didn't really know where I wanted to land as far as what I wanted to study or really do, um, life after hockey kind of deal. And so I kept it as broad as possible, and did a business marketing and management major and as my undergrad with a minor in psychology. And then due to that COVID fifth year, I actually had the opportunity to get my master's degree completed. And so I ended up doing that in something called organizational science and leadership, which I would say is like similar probably to communications, what a communications master's would be, but with more of that emphasis and focus on the leadership side and like, hey, how does this work within an environment where you're leading a team and leading, companies and different people. So yeah, super fun. A lot of the people in that program are actually like already working too, which is
Okay.
cool because you get these different perspectives from the working world. And I kind of got to mesh that with my school experience, my hockey experience. And so, yeah. And then I would say for my independent study, one of my favorite parts was my last semester. I did I think a 70-page paper on mental health in sports. And then I got to take, I did like an independent study of a NIL class as well, like right when it started. So
Oh,
pretty,
okay.
pretty cool experience. And yeah, really, really enjoyed it and do feel like I'm definitely able to apply some of that to what I do today.
Okay. I love that. I just thought that was really interesting. So I was curious to how you kind of went that path. Um, so for our third period, we're just going to kind of have a roundtable discussion. So I do feel like as a teacher, like the classroom can also kind of line up alongside like the locker room, like, dealing with the kids that I teach can also have the same kind of thing as some of the athletes and what they go through. And so I kind of wanted to touch on a couple topics and maybe, each give our perspective on what we see and kind of where they kind of cross paths.
Yeah,
Um,
let's do it.
so the first topic I want to talk about, I'm going to kind of we've talked about it a little bit, but I want to kind of call it like the box score trap or like the test score trap. And so it's this idea of like identity versus performance. And uh, I would say in the classroom, I feel like as far as teachers and just the educational system in general, I think we kind of start everybody off on the wrong foot. I would say that's kind of where they maybe discover that identity versus performance trap first, is maybe in the education system. I personally, because they start testing in third grade, you start getting all these scores, you're sending home your report cards. And if your parents are noticing you're not approaching a certain level, then they start questioning things. And trying to combat that, I feel like at a middle school level, which is where I teach, is very difficult because kids might not be finding their identity in test scores as much anymore, but now they're finding their identity in celebrities or in what their friends tell them they should be, or how many YouTube followers they have, or, you know, um, how many Instagram or Facebook followers, or how many snaps they get a day from Snapchat. I just feel like as a teacher, it's very difficult now because we're not just competing against test scores anymore. We're competing against society. And so that is a big hurdle to come up against. And I do feel like, too, some teachers are like, that's not my responsibility. That's the parents' responsibility. It's not my job is to just teach them content. And my thing is, this is my calling. I wasn't called to be a teacher just because I wanted to teach a subject, right? I wanted to be able to make a difference. And so that's kind of things that we're seeing in, I guess, the younger ages. And so I kind of wanted to get your opinion on like what you're seeing um, with struggles, on the athlete side, and maybe kind of where we meet in the middle.
Well, first off, Sarah, I want to honor you for that too, because we need more teachers with with hearts like that, and hearts for to really see the children grow into everything their potential has to become. Like it's not just a content thing, right? I think it's the same in sports. Like as you go up, you start to become kind of a product in one way, shape, or form. Where it's like, okay, who's the next person up? Who's better? Who's younger? All these things, and yeah, I wish there was a simple solution to it. I would say for one, we've become, yeah, actually, I was just listening to one of my favorite authors, John Eldridge. He has a book, Wild at Heart. And he was saying we've become disciples of the internet
Hmm.
versus disciples of Jesus. And I think what comes with that is this constant feeling of comparison, this constant, like, how do like, come up against this person? How do I match up, whether it's a test score, whether it's just a popularity contest, whether it's sports, like there is an endless list of things to compare yourself by to the world standards. And unfortunately, that list is going to prove that you're not good enough and you don't have what
Hmm.
it takes and you do come up short. And so I think the beautiful blessing in that is the love of Jesus and where he meets you in that, like, hey, I don't have what it takes, Lord, to outcompete all these other people. And it's like, okay, great. I'm glad you came to that realization because I didn't create you to compete against them. I created you to be uniquely one of one and to show up in your giftings and your strengths and bring that authentic version of yourself to the world. And so I think that's a beautiful reminder is like God's not up there comparing me to Sarah or Sarah to one of her students. It's like, no, like he just wants you to bring your whole heart before him and he will like make you more and more into that image of his son, Jesus. And so I think that's the goal. But yeah, once again, I think where it compares from hockey, it's like, well, my job like relies on my performance. My
Hmm.
job kind of relies on me out competing, even like a teammate because you're fighting for positions. So I guess I'll leave it with this without going on too long. The book Inner Excellence, very, very good. One of the most challenging reads I've had as far as taking these concepts and applying them. But one thing they pressed on in that book is to actually like hope for the best in your opponent. And so this is kind of a weird prayer thing I started doing. I think it's weird because I don't know anybody else I know that's done this. I think it's like when I was growing up, especially as like a baby Christian, I would like pray that I would be at my best. And that, like, maybe like hopefully the other team, comes up short, they don't feel good, or like we catch them on a good night and they're tired. One thing I flipped this year was I actually started praying for the other team that they would be at their best and that they would bring their A game and that they would have like the best energy and like feel super confident. Which I know sounds crazy in theory, but what it did, in the book with challenges too, it took the focus off winning and it put the focus on, can I be at my best in order to see where I'm at and where I do measure up. And so it's like by them being at their best, whether I won or lost, I would have feedback of how I can improve. And so I think that would be my message to a student. It's like, it's not that we can't look at other people and compare ourselves, but you can either, I could look at, Connor McDavid in the NHL and be like, holy cow, I'm the worst hockey player ever. Or I could look at, a player who maybe couldn't play in the pro ranks and be like, oh, look, I'm doing well. Well, neither of those are helpful. What's helpful is me going out to compete as hard as I can against somebody else who's in the ECHL right now, who's competing and playing at the best of their ability. And then just seeing what areas and what weaknesses showed up so that I can put some more focus and emphasis on improving that. But I think we got to get rid of the titles of like winning and losing, good and
Hmm.
bad. Um, I think that's where we fall into a bit of a curse, that everything rides or dies on that. And once again, it kind of comes back to that just doesn't tell the full story. So I don't know if that made a ton of sense. If you have any follow up questions on that, Sarah, but that would be kind of my first take on that.
No, I think that's a good point, and I love the fact that you're talking about the switch in the prayer because I know as just a teacher, just a person in general, like if I'm going to compete against somebody, I don't want them to be at their worst or not doing well because even if I was to overcome that, then what is that? That doesn't mean anything at the end of the day. Like you, if you're wishing for somebody to not be at your level so that then what you can do well and then say, okay, I did great. Okay. But then the next question is going to be like, well, did you do great because they weren't at their best? Like there's always going to be those questions. And so I think the way you're approaching it with like if you're going out to compete against somebody, you want them to be able to be the best versions of themselves so that you can also learn what you need to work on for the best version of yourself as well. So I think that's a great point.
Yeah, and I think you said it earlier too, Sarah, about this idea of when we struggle or we go through hard things, like that's where God meets us the most. And I know that's been very true. That definitely spoke to me when you said it, because I'm like, okay, it's great to be in these strength or to live out in your strengths and to be in these positions of success. But once again, if you would have gone behind the scenes, it wouldn't have told the whole story or shown the whole picture. And so one of my favorite verses is 2 Corinthians 12:10. It's like, for that reason, I delight in insults and weaknesses and hardships and in persecutions. For when I am weak, then I am strong, because my strong comes from God's grace. It's like his grace is sufficient for my weakness. And so I really ride or die on that verse, because I'm like, as much as I want to be successful, as much as I want to look like I have it all together, God has proved time and time again that those seasons where my pride gets in the way, he's usually quieter. And then when
Hmm.
I kind of hit those rock bottom moments, I'm like, God, where are you? And I actually take time to invite him in and listen. That's usually when I hear his voice the strongest.
Well, and I think the Lord gives us verses sometimes that we just kind of overlook. And I think those are the ones that are the most impactful. Something that I've learned this year, is the one that I shared with you as well. And that note was, the information about Nehemiah and how, he kept getting people after people after people to try to get him to come down off, a ladder doing what most people would consider mundane work, right? Of, trying to rebuild a tower wall that had been knocked down over and over again. And, his continued response was, I can't come down. Like I'm doing the work of the Lord. And I think that's just every day, just continuing to wake up and being like, whatever happens today, I'm just going to come against it with, I am not coming down. Like this is the work that I've been called to do. And that has been like a shift for me as well. And, going back to like being in the valley and that's where the Lord does his work. You know, uh, I was at my sister's church a couple weeks ago and the pastor was preaching on the woman at the well, which is story that growing up in church I've heard numerous times. But one part that I think shocked me was he mentioned at the end, the disciples were telling him, like, you need to be eating something. You're starving. You've been at this well all day. Like, why aren't you eating? And Jesus responds to them and said, my food is doing the will of the Father who sent me. And I was like, okay, like that was mind blowing to me because normally we stop at the like right before that verse because it talks about,
Yeah.
you're hungry, you need to eat. And he's like, I have food that you don't know about. And that's usually where we stop. And we're like, oh, yeah, okay. He's Jesus. He doesn't need. But then right after that, he says, my food is doing the will of the Father who sent me. So it's like, you know, if we are not struggling and we're just up here on this mountaintop and feeling like we don't need Jesus, then his purpose is not being fulfilled either, which was to, bring us closer to him. So it's a partnership, you know?
Mm, yeah, absolutely. No, I think you hit it. Yeah, hammer on the nail there. I think we missed that. Like, I don't know where we lost that too. And that this kind of, I guess, plays into that question too about this like idea of like perfectionism. Like, I don't want to show my weakness. And I think that's the same with classes. I've felt that in the church too, of like, okay, like I'm a believer now. Like, I started following the Lord my sophomore year of high school. Now I have to have it all together. And it's like, no, it's actually the exact opposite. Like, the more I've grown, honestly, the more I've realized just these different areas that I continue to fall short in. And so, like, I think the beautiful thing is that process of sanctification, which for those who, that's kind of a big churchy word, but it's really just this process of becoming more like Jesus every day. And so that doesn't happen overnight. There's always going to be these areas that we just have to stay like open hands with and just continue bringing to the Lord. But yeah, it's a beautiful thing, and I think Jesus sets that example super clear for us.
Absolutely. Okay, so this next topic I want to touch on, I'm calling it the captain's curse, or in my world, peer accountability. So, um, trying to teach kids who I feel like have leadership potential, um, that sometimes being a leader is not like the cool part that everybody thinks it is, right? Like, oh, I'm a leader. Everybody's going to have to do what I say. And like, but then they don't really understand, like, sometimes holding people accountable, like, it's going to backfire on you. And you might be the only person that's doing what's considered the right thing, but like, you have to do it because that's what they're looking to you for. And so, um, you kind of being a captain and dealing with leadership at different levels, how did you handle like holding your peers and your teammates accountable and holding them to a high standard while also making sure like you didn't tear down relationships or like locker room morale?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest things that comes to mind right away is that idea of like encourage publicly and then I would say address some of those other issues privately. I think like nobody wants to be called out in front of the group. And so I think one thing we do as leaders often, I know like in the sports world, like we kind of assume intentions. And so if somebody is doing something that doesn't match the standard, sometimes we assume that it's because they want to disobey, or we assume that they're being disobedient on purpose or that they're not doing it. And it's like, okay, that's not a good spot to be in as a leader. Like, you have to know kind of the heart behind their why they're doing it. And so I'm like, one, if you kind of look to yourself, it's like, hey, is the standard clear? Because if it's not being communicated in a way that is clear cut and easy to follow, then it shouldn't be a surprise when people aren't doing it. And then secondly, I would say, yeah, there's the old Ted Lasso saying, like, be curious, not judgmental. Like, don't just judge it right away, but be curious. Like, ask questions like, hey, was this standard not clear? Or, hey, I noticed you're doing this. What kind of like, what's the reason behind it? I think there's a power in just asking good questions and letting them kind of explain themselves. Cause then you can be like, all right, like, there's a disconnect here. Or hey, it's something on my end that I actually could have done better as a leader. And so I think that kind of comes down to, hey, like, is there a level of trust though that we can have these hard conversations? So I would say that's important to try to establish, like, especially um, in teams, like at the very beginning, because the longer this delays, the more uncomfortable it gets. One example I have of that is just at Omaha my sophomore year. There were some guys just flat out missing the standard, and we really didn't address it until later in the season, and we underachieved because of it. And because then guys felt uncomfortable. Then guys were like, "Well, we haven't done this before, so can I do it now?" It was like really awkward. And then I guess my only other thought or piece of advice would be like, do your younger teammates, I think this is a really good test. Do your younger teammates feel like they have permission to call things out in you? And well, like, does anyone challenge you as the leader, or do you just kind of get to do what you want? And so hopefully you're holding the high standard where that doesn't have to happen often. But do younger like teammates, not even like, hey, my assistant captains, but do younger teammates feel comfortable bringing things up and addressing areas with me that I might not be meeting the standard as well?
Absolutely. Well, and that kind of leads to kind of the last topic I wanted to touch on, which is I'm going to call it crisis culture, which is like leading through adversity. And so my question would be how how do you as a leader, or how do leaders maintain a standard while also allowing a group space to grieve or go through something when there is adversity? Like where is the line of that, would you say?
Yeah, and I think it's unfortunately not as black and white as we would hope as leaders. Like I think there's some discernment needed in that, especially depending on the situation. So, like for example, when we lost Paul Gerard, my assistant coach, like half the team was freshmen, half the team were older guys, and like everyone was grieving it differently. Everyone had different relationships, and so like there was guys who maybe didn't have their normal energy levels at the rink, and you could tell they were just a bit off. And so it's like, okay, what am I going to do? Go like beat the dead horse kind of thing? It's like, no, like
Right.
you have to meet them where they're at, love, encourage them, and just give them space to talk. And so, um, yeah, I think that's a tough wrestle. I'd actually be curious, Sarah, like on your take on that within like a classroom standard and what that looks like. Um, but I think you just have to know, like as a leader, you're going to go through adversity. You're going to go through ebbs and flows. It's not going to be as perfect as you'd hope. But I hope there's a level of communication that can be had. So one example would be at Omaha before games, I would allow different guys to speak up and talk about like what they thought the key points were to having success that night. And so, like, we pre-scouted teams all week. Our coaches had messaging all week. But right before the game, I'm like, this is our time as a group to just express what we think is going to be the most important thing. And so I would have freshmen speak up. I would have, assistant captains speak up. I would have different guys who are maybe quieter and don't even feel comfortable doing that, like have a voice. And so I think anything like that, any little thing you can do to open up that level of communication and allow all voices to be heard will create a healthy space to at least address that thing and have a level of trust that can be bridged when you do face adversity or hard things.
Hmm. Well, and I think too, it goes back to kind of what you were mentioning as a leader, like what is your standard and does everybody understand like what that means? And I think as a teacher within a classroom, one of the things that I've tried to kind of evolve over the years is that whatever like my classroom motto or our thing that we stick to, trying not to make it related to grades or performance or anything to do with school. Because when something happens adversity wise that is being tested, um, you can't really go back to that at the core and be like, this is the core of what we believe, right? So, one of the things that I try to do with my students every year is we build like our core four beliefs as a class. So, it's like, it's not me coming forward and being, okay, authoritative, like, this is the rules in the classroom, this is what we're doing. We broadly discuss, like, these are four core things that we hold to that anytime there's an adverse reaction or something that comes up, we can go back to those things and be like, okay, does this reaction that we're handling this with, does it go back to those core four things that we said that we were going to believe in as a class? And if it doesn't, like what can we do to kind of make sure that we're leading back to that? And so, you know, one of the things that my school has is like we are a family and family comes first. And um celebrate the wins that aren't on paper. Like that's a big thing. Like you're here. We're happy you're here. We don't have to learn anything today cuz you're here and that's a win in itself. And so I think that's the big thing with adversity is making sure that you have some standards and some things that are not tied to performance so that at the end of the day when you're facing something that questions a performance, do have something to go back to and anchor yourself to, um, regardless of what's happening around you. So that would be what I would say.
Mm. Yeah, we talk a ton in Kansas City about this idea of like evidence versus confidence. And it's like this idea of like, confidence ebbs and flows, but evidence, it's like, I've done it before. I know I can do it again. And so I think with some of those things, like, hey, I'm just going to show up. Like, that's a win in itself. It's evidence that, you know what, I can make it another day. And sometimes, you just need those small wins in life. Like, there's heavy things that happen in life. That's part, I think, the brokenness of this world. And so I'm like, it's not like if those things come, it's when,
Mhm.
unfortunately. And so it's like, okay, once again, like for anyone listening, no, you're not alone in that. No, there's so many people that like love and support you. And so, hey, if you're hurting, if you're in need, reach out. Like there's so many people, like find that one safe person to go to and just know you're not alone.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, and just it kind of all ties back to authenticity and identity, like when things are happening in the world that you start to question things, find that thing that you can always go back to and that's constant and that doesn't change. And I think that's the starting point from everything that goes forward from there. Okay, the last part in this segment is so we read in my leadership class The Energy of Us from John Gordon. I don't know if you know that book, but we do that every year. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to have you pick a number from 1 to 10, which is one of the 10 rules. And then I'm just going to read what that rule is. And I want you to kind of just talk about how you see that rule applied in your life in the locker room or outside.
Okay, let's go with number 9.
Number 9. Okay. So number 9 is drive with purpose. So the basic tagline with that is knowing your why is going to keep you going through the bumps.
Mm. Okay, that was a good pick by me. Yeah, this is actually something I talk with my athletes a ton. And so it's actually one of the first things are established with them is like, hey, what's your why? Behind why you do what you do on a daily basis. Because I mean, I think it builds off what we just talked about with adversity. You will hit bumps. Like it's just the reality of life. It's the reality of sports, school. Like not everything's gonna go your way. And so yeah, I think establishing your why, maybe easier said than done. Like it's not something you can just brush over. Like it's got to be something that's intentional that you come back to. So I think the best way for me to explain that from like my point of view would be just the example of like, hey, my why. Actually, when I first got into pro hockey, was for a result. It was to get up to the AHL and then potentially the NHL. And that was actually fleeting because of how out of my control it was. There was a lot of factors I couldn't control within that why. Like I don't think it was good. And I would say it was also very me focused. It was like, hey, I'm the center of the universe. This is all about Nolan, Nolan, Nolan. What switched this year and what gave me a lot more freedom to be at my best was when I made that why about other people. And so I'm like, hey, my purpose in hockey is God's given me this gift to go glorify his name, but to also serve and impact those who feel overlooked, unseen, and feel like they don't have a voice. And I get to recognize them, I get to notice them, and I get to use this platform of hockey to make an impact and to make a difference in people's life and to bring joy to the brokenhearted and to bring healing to those who feel broken and to see those who feel like they're overlooked and they're too far from God. And so um and think when I can remind myself of that why, it actually helps me, one, when I'm like going through those hard times to be like, all right, like Nolan, take a step outside yourself, like cut your ego and go serve other people. Go see who you can help. Because often when we are struggling, when we are depressed or anxious, we're so internally focused and we have so much weight and pressure on ourselves. One of the best ways to relieve that is to go put the focus on other people and to
Mhm.
go serve and to go help someone else that has a need for you. And so I would say that's an awesome concept. But yeah, really grilling down like your why. And then my challenge for your listeners would be like, but make it about other people. Like, don't just be like, this is about me, me, me. Because I think the results take care of themselves when we do just show up looking for, hey, God, how can I use this gift to help and serve others?
Absolutely. I love that. And yeah, that for anybody that needs a good book on inspiration to any of the John Gordon books, I highly recommend. We have all of them at school and there hasn't been one that I've been disappointed with. So, um okay, so rapid fire overtime. Got some fun questions in here. I just want you to shoot out the first thing that comes to mind. So, it's 2 a.m. on a road trip and your team bus stops at a gas station. What is your go-to snack and drink?
Pretty lame on this, honestly, but it's gotten better. I would say I like those freezies. Like if I could do like a Coke freezy or something like that, or like the movie theater ones, like the ice thing. Love that. I'm not much of a candy person. I don't know. I love cheddar ruffles. So maybe it's
Okay.
like a bag of chips, but kind of
Yeah.
feels gross if you have that and then have to try to go to sleep on a bus. So
Okay. Face offs. Is winning a draw about pure strength, quick hands, or outsmarting the linesman? Or a little bit of all three?
uh, a little bit of all three, but I would lean, at least for me, more into the quickness and timing.
Okay. Um, who on your teammates roster right now, or you could do previous as well, and you don't have to name names, has the absolute worst taste in pregame music?
Uh, well, you know what? Honestly, I always throw my own headphones in because I don't like this. I actually started doing some more worship music. I just can't do rap. I'm not a rap guy. So anyone that plays rap, I'm like out of here. I'm either like worship or if I need a little more pick me up, maybe it's like some EDM. So that's usually
Yeah.
my route or 80s rock.
I do feel like too as a fan, I feel like all of the ECHL arenas have the same track. There's some songs like if I have to hear this song again during warm-ups, I'm
Yeah.
done.
It's so,
So,
it's so, it's so, it's so lame. Give me some
yeah,
80s throwback and I would be playing way better.
right? There you go. Who is the toughest or most annoying team to play against in your division?
Good question. Well, honestly, our give your team a shout out. We struggled with Tulsa this year, which from a standings thing was, I guess, kind of funny because I know they
Mhm.
like had their ups and downs throughout the year, but I think they beat us like 4 or 5 times. I'm pretty sure we only lost like 12 in the regular season. So they, yeah, they're like heavy, hard. Just play like a pretty tight style. So I think that was kind of the team this year for us.
Okay. Who is one player that you would not want to face in a fight from the
Uh,
league?
D- Daniel Amesbury. We did a mock fight when he was in Kansas City, and I felt him like twist my jersey, and I was like, "This dude could literally end my career right now if he wanted to."
I mean, I don't know if you know this, but he used to play in Tulsa as well. Um, there was a time where he had knocked a guy so much that blood was coming everywhere, and I just remember I looked at him and I'm like, "Nope." I'm
What
there's
one of the nicest guys you're meeting
oh,
off the ice
super
too,
sweet, super
which
sweet,
is
but I feel like that's
so
always
funny.
how it is.
Yeah, great teammate.
But
Shout out Diamond Hands.
he's one that you don't wanna face, that's for sure.
Totally.
Okay, if you were the ECHL commissioner for a day, what is one rule you would change or enact new?
I would get rid of the 3-and-3s. I think I think that wears and tears on your body a little too much. So,
Yep.
yeah, a little more spacing in the games in general.
Okay. And last question here. If you could put your Coach O'Had, in the penalty box for a 2-minute minor, what do you think his infraction would be?
That's a good question. I could see him just kind of like hacking somebody in the back of the legs, like behind the play, like getting away, like kind of being sneaky with it, but then like you have two refs that night, one of them just catches it out of the corner of his eye.
Okay. Okay. Um, all right. So this last segment is what I call like the mic drop. This is where I am going to drop the mic and I'm going to give you the floor to talk about anything you want to kind of end with. It could be a passion, um, a platform, a memory or something you want to share. Anything that's on your mind, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I'd say the two final, I guess, closing things. I think we had on a lot of good topics tonight. Um, One of my favorite authors, Bob Goff, he always says like Jesus never asked you to agree with him; he asked you to go do something with it. And so I think we live in a day and age of like constant information, constant knowledge from standpoint, but not a lot of action. So I'm like, okay, if you enjoyed listening to this podcast today, take one thing and then just go take that courageous step towards action, right? And that could be something big, that could be something super small, but it's that those small decisions are often the ones that build a lot of momentum moving forward. So I would say take one thing from this podcast, apply it. And then the last thing I just close with is like this sign I actually had up in my room in high school, and it just said be uncommon. And I think it kind of matches with the idea of being authentic. Like there's only one version of you that God created. And so the worst thing we can do is live in isolation. The worst thing we can do is compare ourselves to other people. Just keep pressing into who God created you uniquely to be. And like for me, like that's been a struggle to get comfortable in my own skin. But I think I keep coming back to that idea of like, hey, it's okay if I don't always fit in. It's okay if I don't have the best relationship with each and every person on the team. I just want to show up as my authentic version of myself and be consistent in that, because I know that over time, like I'll win people over. I know that over time, I will step into everything that God has created me to do. So I guess I just don't want to waste time anymore, right? Like life's short.
Mm,
I actually had a really good friend of mine pass away around Thanksgiving this past year, and it was kind of that first eye opener of like we're not really given tomorrow. It's not an absolute given. So each day is such a blessing. So take advantage of it, be your authentic self, and go chase those things that God's called you to do. Like, whether it's Sarah, when you mentioned like just doing the podcast, and like I know for me too, I'm like, some of that's uncomfortable and hard, but that's usually the place we grow the most. So, just don't listen to this and go on with your day. Find that one thing, be uncommon, and just go start making that impact.
I love that. And, one of the reasons why I started the podcast was I just felt like um, athletes in general, especially minor league athletes, you guys all have stories that I think go well beyond your performance on the ice. And I think it was time somebody gave you guys the platform to be able to share that. And yeah, so I'm so thankful that you were able to come on today and do just that. So, in kind of closing, why don't you share out if you'd like, if your podcast, if you'd like people to kind of see what you're about and your podcast, if you want to share that, and anything else that you maybe want them to know about or follow, go ahead and share that.
Yeah, so two biggest ones. So becoming steadfast is my podcast that I've been running. We try to do some weekly. That's hit or miss right now, coming off the season, but hopefully moving forward, it'll be a weekly podcast. And then Captain's Coach, or sorry, at captains.coach on Instagram would be the best way to kind of follow content on social media. And if you're curious, if you're an athlete listening to this, or even some high schooler, middle schooler, college kid that is struggling with like navigating some of these hard things in life, whether that be sports, whether that be school. We hit on so many different topics today. I love um, working with younger athletes, younger people, younger students that are just really want to take hold of their life and live into that full potential that God calls them into. So if that's you and you're interested in some type of coaching or consulting, feel free to reach out via Instagram, send me a message, and would love to connect with you and see where I can help out.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you again so much for coming on the podcast. And I am excited to see where your journey continues to take you in the Steadfast program and all the amazing things that the Lord is going to be able to accomplish through you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sarah. Great time today.
Thank you. All right, friends. Once again, I want to thank Nolan Sullivan for joining us today and sharing his heart. One of the things that I would like to touch base with that really spoke to me today was the passion that Nolan has for his calling. And so, friends, one thing I would encourage you to do is
whether it's going to the Lord in prayer, which is what I would do, or just searching within yourself and finding those things that you are passionate about and you're interested in and you feel like you're called to do. And like Nolan said, don't make it about yourself, make it about how you can help other people. And whatever that is, attack it with a passion and a love for doing that. And the impact that you'll be able to make will go above and beyond what you can even imagine. And once again, if you're interested in learning more about Nolan's projects that he has going on, and also just listening into his podcasts and his different episodes where he dives deeper into leadership and character, you can check out his podcast, Steadfast, on Spotify. And you can also follow him on Instagram at Captain's Coach. So once again, thank you for Nolan Sullivan for joining us today.